Takehiro Tomiyasu confirms he's undergone surgery. We'll get into the uncomfortable truth around the Japanese international. We'll discuss Mikel Arteta's wildcard option in attack, and we'll react to Howard Webb's laughable explanation around the Lewis-Skelly red card on the PGMOL's propaganda show hosted by Michael Owen. Plus, we'll go over the club's financial results for the 23-24 season that have just been released. 10, 15, 20 minutes before we've gone on air. All of that and more to come on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Don't go anywhere. Hey, everybody. How are we? Hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. Welcome back to the show. Good to see you on this Wednesday morning. We have got a special edition of Symeou Says. That's what I was told to call it. We'll be bringing you that live tonight at around about 10:15 p.m. UK time. It will be available to download in your podcast feeds as well, of course, from bright and early tomorrow morning, where we'll be reacting to whatever happens in those two blockbuster games this evening. Manchester City go away to the Santiago Bernabeu looking to overturn their defeat in the first leg and hoping to book their place in the next phase of the Champions League. But perhaps more importantly for us, Liverpool go to Villa Park. Can they drop points? Can Unai Emery do us a favour? We'll get into whatever happens, however all of that unfolds tonight on Symeou Says, which is what I've been told to name. I have to keep saying that because I feel like naming stuff after myself is a little bit cringy. So, but if someone else has told me, then it's fine. If someone else has suggested it, then it's certainly more acceptable, I guess. Big hello to everybody in the live chat. We got Tom, we got Derek, we got Moore, we've got James, we've got Hacker, Rowan is with us, Glenn is with us, D1997, Richie. We've got Vimos in the chat. We've got Sniper Scope. Hacker says the kits are a nice touch. Yeah, for those of you watching on video, we are slowly getting there in terms of dressing up the man cave. Like when I moved house, I was desperate to build a man cave as quickly as possible because I couldn't record. It wasn't sustainable the way we were doing it in the corner of a bedroom, having to close the door, tell the kids to be quiet, all the rest of it. It was a nightmare. It was a disaster. So we built the man cave. And I moved into it straight away. It wasn't finished. I didn't have all the trimmings that I wanted. But slowly, we are getting there. So we're dressing up the set more and more as we go. And I can't wait to get to a point where I'm totally satisfied with it. I don't know if I ever will because I'm just that type of person. But anyway, good to have you guys with us on another episode of the pod. Let's get into our stories. Actually, just before we get into our stories, I've got to do this because I had maybe 5 or 6 YouTube comments, but probably about 7 or 8 DMs on top of that, calling me out yesterday for basically moaning about the British weather. It appears that some of our Canadian listeners took issue with me moaning about it being like 3 or 4 degrees or whatever it was here in London yesterday, when they're having to deal with like minus 15 and some cases much worse than that. So I do apologize. Like I know that you guys have it much worse. I would argue that you guys are probably used to it, whereas I'm not. I mean, I've had the heating on for a couple of hours. It's nice and toasty in here, but I still don't want to take off my body warmer. I'm of Mediterranean blood and I cannot take the cold. It just doesn't agree with me, to put it quite simply and bluntly. But yeah, I know that a lot of you were keen to point out that you're dealing with much worse cold and much worse conditions. And yeah, okay, fair enough. You win. Anyway, let's move on. Then let's start with our first story. We're going to talk about Takehiro Tomiyasu. We're going to discuss what I believe to be the uncomfortable truth about the Japanese international. So Takehiro Tomiyasu confirmed yesterday on Instagram that he has undergone surgery on his knee. Now, we knew that this was in the pipeline. There had been conversations around this in the past. There was a suggestion that this was something that needed to be done in order for Takehiro Tomiyasu to get to a place where, you know, he can play again. Like ultimately, he's been hindered by injury so much. It's been a massive problem. It's kept him sidelined for ages. And he put this post up yesterday on social media, just sort of explaining exactly what the deal is with him. Let me bring his words up for you so I can read you the caption that he posted as well. He's clearly going through, I think right now, a really, really difficult time, Tomiyasu. There's no question about that. And I do have a lot of sympathy for the situation that he finds himself in. Here it is. This was the post that he put up. And the caption read as follows. I've had surgery on my knee a few days ago, and I've already started my rehab to do what I love most again. It has been the toughest period in my career for sure, and it carries on a bit more, but I won't give up. Thank you for your support, and see you again. I'd imagine that Takehiro Tomiyasu, aside from experiencing the physical issues that come with an injury and obviously not being available, etc., I think mentally this has to have been quite difficult for him. It's not the first time he broke down in Arsenal colours. It probably won't be the last. He's a player who I think is of huge quality, but unfortunately, his body just keeps letting him down. And, you know, we brought him from Bologna. We bought him for, what was it, 18 million quid or whatever it was. And at the time, I remember thinking, okay, you know, I'd seen a bit of him in Serie A. This is a decent signing. It's not a huge amount of money. Therefore, it doesn't represent any great risk. And getting him in could see us sort of really improve the squad. He came in initially playing as a right back when Ben White was playing at centre back, along with Gabriel. That was before William Saliba was kind of integrated into the side after a series of loan spells. And Tomiyasu made that position his own. He did a really, really good job. Obviously, when William Saliba came into the picture, Mikel Arteta had to find a way of getting him in, and he chose to go with Ben White at right fullback predominantly over Takehiro Tomiyasu. And obviously, that will be partly because he feels that Ben White has a little bit more technical quality. I certainly think that's the case, if I'm giving my opinion here. But on top of that, Ben White's availability, and I know he's had a rotten season as well himself, but generally his availability is very, very good. And Takehiro Tomiyasu's hasn't been. He hasn't ever really been able to have a good long run in the Arsenal team without pulling up again, without breaking down in some way, shape, or form. And as a result of that, even if he was, you know, top of the list in terms of priorities, as a manager, you can't rely on him. This is the problem. You know, if I go onto his transfer marked page just for a minute, let's have a look at the injury history of Takehiro Tomiyasu since he's come to Arsenal. I'm not really interested in what's gone before. I know people say that you can kind of gauge how injury prone or not a player is based on that. But let's look at purely his sort of injury history at Arsenal. Let me just bring this up. Bear with me a second. The page is loading. There we go. Let me just share my screen once again. Here we go. Whoops. Present. Share screen. As you can tell, I'm not the most technical person anyway. Here we go. So you look at his injury history since coming to Arsenal, and you can see it there, right? When he first arrived, he had a calf injury in the 21-22 season, which saw him miss 11 games. In the following season, the 22-23 season, he had muscular issues, and then he had to have knee surgery, which saw him miss in total 20 games across that season. In the 23-24 campaign, there was 2 calf injuries. One saw him miss 6 games, one saw him miss 7. And then you move into this season where he missed 9 games through an injury right at the start of the campaign, then 28 with a knee injury, and now he's having knee surgery. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is, if you look back through his history, if you go all the way back to the 2021 season, you can see knee problems coming up. Okay. And then you take it forward to 22-23, knee surgery. Take it on to 24-25, and it's knees again. And so whatever this issue is, and we don't know the ins and outs of it, we don't know the minute details of what exactly the problem is and how exactly they plan to rectify it with surgery, but it's clear that knees are a problem for Takehiro Tomiyasu. I don't know if it's the same knee, I don't know if it's 1 knee, 2 knees, whatever. But yeah, it needed to be dealt with. And although that brings another sense of real frustration at the fact that he's going to be out for another period of time, he's not going to play again this season. Sami Mokbel suggested last night that he might not even make the start of next season. So as a result of that, you're looking at Takehiro Tomiyasu, and you're thinking, can we continue with this guy? At least that's what I'm thinking. Like, I've got no problem with the player. I really rate the player. I think when he's available, I think when he's fit, he's a great asset to the side because he can play right back really competently. He's shown that he can play centre back, which is ultimately where he played prior to even arriving at Arsenal, as part of a back three. He's shown at Arsenal that he can play as part of a centre back pairing. He could play at left back, where he's done an incredible job. And the game that always stands out and jumps out in my mind is that game against Liverpool, where he handled Mo Salah brilliantly. Physically, aside from the injuries, he's got everything you want from a defender. He's quick across the ground. He's strong. He's got great height, aerial presence. He's got a determination. He's got so much going for him, Takehiro Tomiyasu, that when you read about these injuries and the problems and how long he's now expected to be out for, your heart breaks. Genuinely, that's how I feel for Takehiro Tomiyasu, because if I'm frustrated by it, if Mikel Arteta's frustrated by it, if the football club are frustrated by it, imagine what he is going through. Imagine what he is feeling. And I think mentally, this has to have been a really, really, really taxing period for Takehiro Tomiyasu. And I think when we're talking about injuries, we don't often focus on that side of things. But I think it's really, really important. And I think it's important that we highlight that here. So yeah, Takehiro Tomiyasu out at least until the new season. Whether he'll be back for the start of that remains to be seen. The uncomfortable truth that I was referring to, though, guys, is that we probably do need to start to plan without him. And I know he recently got an improved contract, which I think was right given the way his role in the squad had developed. But the question around that I had was, well, do you really need to do it, given that you have no idea currently, and this is at the time of giving him that contract? I don't know when the negotiations started, but I know when it was announced. Did you really need to do that at this point, given that he's really struggling to prove his fitness? And those that are very cynical and those that are very critical will question whether the club were right to do that. I think you got to look after your players to a certain point. And I think you need to show loyalty in order to receive loyalty. Again, no doubt in my mind that when he's fit and he's available, he's a great asset to the squad. But given his availability issues at the moment, I think whether it's a financial thing or not, you've got to start to think about life without Takehiro Tomiyasu. You cannot account for him being available when squad planning, when registering squads in various competitions, etc., etc. I genuinely do believe, as much as it pains me to say, that we've got to that point with him. Let's take some of your comments in the live chat. With regards to Takehiro Tomiyasu, there's plenty of comments coming in. A big shout out to Stan the Man, who's listening in from Cyprus. Hope you're enjoying it, mate. I hope the weather's much better than it is here. In fact, I know it is. Enjoy. Tom says it's frustrating that Tommy is only getting his surgery now. It's the benefit of hindsight that he was already chronically injured last summer, and it could have happened then. He'd be now fully recovered by now. Amberly says that feel for him, honestly. I read somewhere that he lost his mum recently too, so must be feeling really, really down. Stan also says Tommy's a very versatile player across the back four, but if he's always unavailable for selection, we need to move on. Laughing Man says we can't sell him. Well, we're definitely not going to be able to sell him while he's on the treatment table. That's going to make it incredibly difficult. So, when I'm talking about loyalty and needing to look after your players, it also benefits the football club to oversee his recovery, to aid him in his recovery, and to get him into a place where other clubs will then look at him and go, do you know what? He does have a patchy injury history. There is an element of risk attached to us doing this deal, but because we know what he's capable of, and because we're confident that he's gone through all the right things to get back to where he needs to be, let's have a go. Let's have a punt. What else have we got? I'm just rolling through your comments. Mario, big hello to you, mate, and love to the family. He says, hi, Harry, hope all is well. Just to chip in, like you, I think he was fantastic on the pitch when fit. It just seems that he's unsuited to the demands of the Premier League. Love him, but sell him when fit. Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. There's some players who, in certain conditions, in certain environments, they can thrive. And I do think that Takehiro Tomiyasu is one of the players who came to the Premier League and really adapted quickly in terms of understanding what was required and understanding the ferocity of English football and all the things that we tend to associate with our game. but obviously his head says one thing and his body's doing another. And so I don't doubt that he understands the rigors of the Premier League, and I don't doubt that he settled really, really quickly. But physically, it's a problem for him. Would these injuries have started happening had he remained in the Serie A? Maybe not. There's a lot of factors that you've got to consider. The intensity of the league, the team that he was playing in, the demands of the coach, the weather, etc., etc. Would it have been the same if he stayed in Italy? Maybe not. So you can put it down to him moving to England if you want. But I just think there's an element of rotten luck here, and I really do feel for him. Alex says, just highlighting some of his good performances, handled Rafinha when we played Leeds. He did a good job on Sane as well compared to Kivior. Damien says, we need to be ruthless. We should have sold him a season ago. Yeah, look, in an ideal world, but hindsight is always a wonderful thing, isn't it? But that's the latest on Takehiro Tomiyasu. As I say, I think the uncomfortable truth is that at some point, once he's recovered, we're going to have to think about moving him on. And I think if I'm a manager now and I've got a list in my office of players that I feel I can rely on, I'm probably at the point with Takehiro Tomiyasu where I'm crossing his name off. And I don't mean that in a horrible way. I know that sounds horrible. It sounds like I'm writing him off completely. But I just feel like I would have got to that stage if I was his coach. I think Mikel Arteta does get to those stages with certain players. I think he got there with Kieran Tierney, for instance, and hence why his Arsenal career went the way it did. There's only so many times you can trust in a player to make a full recovery without having that fear clouding over you of when they're going to go down again. And this is where we're at with Tomiyasu. So the uncomfortable truth is that after his surgery, after he's recovered, and once he makes himself available again, I think you need to start thinking about moving him on. And yeah, looking to replace him in the squad. Okay, let's take a short pause. When we come back, we're going to talk a couple more stories. We're going to talk about Mikel Arteta's potential wild card in attack. Who are we talking about? We'll get into that right after this. Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. If you're watching us live on YouTube right now, don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. All of that stuff really, really does help. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, or the likes, make sure you leave us a review. That stuff really, really does help as well. I wanted to talk about a young man who is attracting a fair bit of attention down in Arsenal's under 18s, and that is Andre Harriman-Annous. Now, there have been images of him training with the first team. Obviously, we're really thin on the ground when it comes to forward, so it's kind of understandable. But there's a debate ongoing, I think, around whether or not this is a kid that Mikel Arteta should put a bit of faith in. He's seen it work wonders with Myles Lewis-Skelly. He's seen it work wonders with Ethan Nwaneri. Is it time now to do that again? Is it time to look into the academy and try and pick out someone that you think has the potential to make that step up, at least give him a taste? Andre Harriman-Annous is just 17 years old. So when I say give the kid a chance, I'm literally talking about a kid. Okay, but in the under 18s Premier League this season, he's got 6 goals and 2 assists in 7 appearances. He's got 3 goals in 3 games in the FA Youth Cup, and he's got 1 goal in the PL2 where he's made 7 appearances. He also scored in the EFL Trophy, and he's got 1 in the UEFA Youth League, which is basically like UEFA Champions League, but for kids. So, look, I think if you look at his metrics and you look at his stats, they're quite impressive, and you could understand why, in our current predicament, he would be towards the front of the queue. But I'm always very reluctant to make too much of statistics that are put on the board in the under 18s league or in the Premier League too, because I've watched a lot of those competitions. I've covered a lot of those competitions over the last few years, since sort of moving into the commentary field. And I just think that the level is very, very different, and it's miles away from what senior football demands of you. So I think they are an indicator. You know, if he's standing out in those competitions, then he's clearly one of the best in class, if you like. But that doesn't guarantee that he's going to be able to make the step up. I am worried a little bit about throwing youngsters in too soon. I've always had that attitude, even towards Ethan Nwaneri. when he first burst onto the scene, and even towards Myles Lewis-Skelly. Those two guys have taken to it like ducks to water, right? But I don't think that's always going to be the case. So, yep, if I'm Mikel Arteta, I'm having a good look at Harriman-Annous in training. I'm having a good, sort of assessment, if you like, of his performances and trying to figure out how he could integrate, if he could integrate. Sniper says the kid can't do any worse than Sterling, who's offering absolutely nothing. At the moment, that feels true. And it's mad to think that Raheem Sterling, this seasoned pro who's been there, done it, got the trophies. We went through his honours list yesterday on the show, is unable to offer us anything. And so it does make you think, well, why not throw this kid in and give him a chance? Maybe the fearlessness, that he will, I think, have being so young, and the sort of the wave of excitement that he can ride if given the opportunity. It might see him even just in the short term, giving us something a little bit more. So I'm not against it, but obviously on the very small sample size I've seen of him, it's quite difficult to say, yes, this will work, or no, it won't. Like, so I don't want to sit here and put loads of pressure on the guy, but obviously he is involved in training. He is somebody that Mikel Arteta is watching very, very closely at the moment. And he is potentially someone that you could see, at least on the substitutes bench, in the coming weeks, at least until we get some of our players back. So watch this space on that one. Do want to move on. Let's talk the PGMOL's propaganda show. I love moaning about this. Let's bring it on. So I said I wasn't going to watch it. I said I wasn't going to listen to anything that Howard Webb had to say. And I certainly wasn't going to listen to anything that Michael Owen had to say. That was my kind of viewpoint around the Myles Lewis-Skelly sending off, because we knew that this next edition of the PGMOL's propaganda show, otherwise known as Mic'd Up, was on its way. And it was interesting, actually, because I wondered whether they would focus on this incident or whether they'd just sweep it under the carpet and say, well, the FA have called us out. Clearly, we're wrong. Blah, blah, blah. Let's just sweep this under the carpet and try and move on from it. They didn't. They tackled it head first. They went into it. They sort of broke it down. And honestly, it was like I think it was a 5, 6, 7 minute section, whatever it was. And I got to work last night. I was covering Notts County against Colchester United in League 2. And I got to work, and I never write my intro to a game, or even loosely, like, until I get there, because a lot can change, a lot can happen. What are you feeling? What's the atmosphere telling you, etc., etc. So normally what I do is I arrive, I sit down, I put the final touches on my notes, and then I write my intro, or a sort of skeleton of an intro that I'm going to deliver as the two teams come out of the tunnel and as I take over as the commentator, right? So that's what I do. I got there nice and early, as I say. I finished that off, and I had loads of time. And I thought, let me take a wander and get myself a cup of coffee. Cold night, let me take a wander and go and get myself a cup of coffee. So off I go. And then I get a notification on my phone that says that there's a clip posted, or that these two have been discussing it, Michael Owen and Howard Webb. So I click on it, and immediately I was like, do I really want to watch this? I sort of paused it and hesitated. Do I really want to watch this? Oh, go on then. I've got time to kill. And honestly, I was laughing out loud. I was literally laughing out loud at what I was hearing. Like, the lack of accountability is honestly alarming, man. Like, Howard Webb basically starts off by saying it's not a red card. It should have been a yellow card. There isn't any brutality. There isn't any excessive force. All of the things that we were saying at the time. And says we'd have preferred that a yellow card was awarded, right? So in a polite way, he's basically saying, my officials on the day, they messed that up. That's what he's doing. But as the conversation goes on, and I don't know if this was pre-rehearsed or pre-planned, you got Michael Owen going, oh, I don't know, it's not a bad decision. And I just thought, oh, here we go. Like, you are literally teeing Howard Webb up to be able to try and somehow defend what was one of the worst decisions of the season, and one that I think pretty much everybody unanimously agreed was a shambles. Yet Howard Webb trying to justify it, trying to say it's not the most outrageous decision, it's not the worst one of the season, blah 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 blah, and all this rubbish. It's just boring. It's horrible to hear. It's sort of soul destroying when you sort of cotton on to how PR-y and sort of sanitized these conversations are. Just be honest. Just say Michael Oliver got it wrong, and the VAR got it wrong as well. Just say Michael Oliver got it wrong, hence why the card was overturned. And the fourth official, as his boss, I'm saying, should have, asked more questions, should have identified that there wasn't any brutality, that there wasn't any excessive force. We made a mistake. The card was overturned and we move on from it. The fact that Arsenal went on to win that game protected them so much, because it meant that, yes, there was a level of outrage, but that level of outrage never reach the heights that it would have done had Arsenal dropped points. I never, ever, ever, ever give a care in the world for what Richard Keys has to say. But I did come across one of his tweets earlier today, which I thought made a lot of sense. Yes, that guy, Richard Keys, that famed for talking crap most of the time? Yeah, he actually said something that makes sense. Hold on, where is it? There we go. He says, how can we trust an organization like the PGMOL, who back Oliver's howler at Wolves before being forced to accept what we all knew, but then claim it wasn't a horrendous error? It was. It could have cost Arsenal their title challenge. Why keep lying and covering it up? That's exactly it. We all make mistakes in life. Everybody does. Nobody's perfect, okay? We were outraged. Yes, of course we were at the time, but we won the game, and therefore it would have been easier than in other instances to move on from. But instead of holding their hands up and allowing us to move on from it, they doubled down on it, and now they've tripled down on it. And it's just embarrassing, man. Switch them off, get rid of the PGMOL. The Premier League need to take responsibility for the standard of their officials. The reason the PGMOL, in my view, still exists is because it gives the Premier League a shield to hide behind. And back in the day, we had leaders at the PGMOL like the great Keith Hackett. Did I always agree with everything that Keith Hackett said or decided? No, but I've had him on this podcast many, many times. And he is someone who is willing to take accountability. He is someone who truly loves the game and who will call out mistakes when they happen. Doesn't mean that you got to sack Michael Oliver and never let him referee again. But you have to call out a mistake when it's a mistake. You have to be transparent. The whole point in having this show is to be transparent, but you're not transparent when you're on it. So what's the bloody point? Anyway, enough about that. It was just an absolute disgrace and a shambles. If you haven't watched it and you fancy a good laugh tonight, go and watch it. Because honestly, what you're going to hear come out of not just Howard Webb's mouth, by the way, Michael Owen does his fair bit of nonsense in this as well. He is steering the conversation in a way that must have been pre-rehearsed, because surely he's not that silly. Surely not. Anyway, let's move on and let's talk about some numbers that were released this morning that I think will interest you as Arsenal supporters. Welcome back to the pod. We are going to take some of your questions in a little bit. So if you've got them, start chucking them in the live chat. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you're listening to us on audio, then please do subscribe and leave us a review is what I was going to say. Please. All of that stuff really, really does help. But now I want to get into Arsenal's financial results, which are out for the year end May 2024. So it's from 23 to 24. It's the 23-24 season, essentially. And if you go over to the Arsenal website, you can read the full report, in which there's a lot of context and there's a lot of explanation around some of the numbers. And it's an interesting read. I'd strongly advise that you go over and check it out. But for the purpose of the podcast, I'm not going to sit here and read through the entire report for you. I am just going to pick out some of the highlights. Now, I sat down with a pen and paper a little bit earlier on when I saw this article drop, and I started scribbling down the numbers and, what can I say about this, or what's this gone from and to, etc., etc. And then I opened up X, and the fantastic Charles Watts had delivered a nice breakdown on his X feed, which has essentially saved me a fair amount of time. So let's have a look at that, because that picks out the key points and we can sort of work our way through them and discuss them. So Arsenal's financial results are out for the year end of May 2024. The club have announced a loss of £17.7 million. However, that is down from the loss recorded in 2023, which was £52.1 million. The revenue that Arsenal generated was a record revenue of £616.6 million, which is up from £466.7 million. Now, that'll be for a number of reasons. Obviously, the performance on the pitch has seen us go to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, has seen us sort of, get greater Premier League prize money, etc., etc. But also commercially, just looking at this, it looks like Arsenal have done a good job of increasing things on that side as well. Matchday revenue is up to 131.7 million from 102.6 million. Not sure exactly how you go from 102 to 131. Is it ticket prices going up? Is it an increased spend in terms of what people are spending in and around the stadium on a match day? Don't know the exact ins and outs of it, but Arsenal managing to raise the bar in that sense as well. Broadcast revenues have gone up to £262.3 million from £191.2 million. So if I just calculate the jump there, right? 191.2, take away 262.3, £71.1 million. That's how much more Arsenal made in broadcast revenue. Now, that comes down to a number of things. First of all, when you are title challengers and you get to the business end of the season, and it comes to the point where the broadcasters are now selecting their games rather than having to show each club a certain number of times, which is what they're obligated to do at the start of the season, you get to a place where if you're a club fighting for something, particularly when it's right at the top of the league, you are going to be more attractive to a TV audience. And to that, Arsenal are massive. And you can understand why more of our games were being picked for broadcast, hence why the revenue have increased. The Champions League is massive in this, huge in this. And each round you progress, you make a fair chunk. And Arsenal, of course, got to the quarterfinals, which is somewhere that they hadn't been in a long, long time. So Arsenal being competitive on the pitch makes them more attractive to the broadcasters, and therefore your broadcast revenue increases. We mentioned commercial revenues already. They've gone up from 169.3 mil to 2.18 let me read that again. Sorry, I don't know why I'm saying it like that. 169.3 million pounds was where we were, and we've gone up to 218.3 million pounds. So there's a big jump there. The commercial stuff has been massive. Player trading profit has gone up to 52.4 million pounds from 12.2, and we kind of expected that, given the fact that over the last couple of years we've not had to pay people off and that type of thing. Now, this goes up to May 2024, so it doesn't include what we did in the summer. And I suspect that if you fast forward to this time next year, when May 2025's figures come out, you are going to see a greater profit in that sense, because we had a decent summer in terms of moving people on and getting fees in for them. I know that the fans will disagree with that, because a lot of us felt that there was a lot of money recouped. Not a great deal or not enough went out in terms of addressing some of the areas in the squad, but we're talking about profit here. And so I'd imagine that's going to look a lot healthier come next year. Wages jumped massively from £234.8 million to £327.8 million. That's massive. So that comes from building the squad out, bringing people in on bigger chunks of money, which obviously we've done over the last few years. But also it comes from, improving people's contracts, right? You've got players that were on quite lowly contracts, but as their importance increases, as their role becomes bigger, and as you're trying to then tie them down for a longer period of time, you have to, in order to convince them, you have to pay them more money. So wages are going to keep going up if Arsenal want to stay competitive and if Arsenal want to keep hold of their very best players. If we continue to perform in the competitions that we're in, if we continue to go far in the Champions League and our broadcast revenues are making massive jumps up, like the 70 million quid increase that we saw over this period that we're reporting here, then you can cope with that. You can live with that. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, that, because we got to 70, next year it'll be 140 or whatever. It's not that simple. There is a ceiling with regards to how much you can earn. But as long as our performance on the pitch is good, we'll always generate the broadcast revenues. If our performance on the pitch is good, the match day revenues will always be there because the demand for tickets is massive. And that allows them to put the prices up. That allows them to maximize that. And people do complain, but there's so much demand to go and watch the Arsenal. You'll get people that will say, I don't care if you won't pay it, I bloody will, and I'll go. Okay. And obviously we've done really, really well on the commercial side as well. And all of that really helps. I think next summer or next February, when we look at the numbers for May 2020, going up to the year end of, let me rephrase that. When we get to the next set of results, I think you're going to see the player trading profit thing really increase. And that means that you can offset that against the wages jumping up massively, as we've seen here. So ultimately, what I'm saying is that this is kind of how I expected it to be. I'm not surprised really by anything. I'm not taken aback by anything. I think Arsenal have been on a much more stable footing for a little while now. And although we're not in profit yet, the club have managed to really significantly reduce their losses. They've more than halved it over the course of a year. So that says a lot. And obviously the Champions League thing, I think, is a massive factor in that. But yeah, those are the latest numbers. You can go on arsenal.com and you can have a read of the full report, and it will give you a lot more context and information. Charles Watts, give him a follow. He's done a fantastic job of just breaking down some of the key points, and that's what we've used as our reference point here this morning on the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. But yeah, no surprises as far as the numbers are concerned. No real shocks. And I expect them to look even better next season. The problem is that we need to show that is then helping us on the pitch as well. Otherwise, there's going to be some unhappy supporters, isn't there? That's the way it goes. Right. Have you got any questions? Let's take a few of your questions for the last few moments of the show before I sign off. Jalali likes the shirts in the background as well. We can rotate them, you see. When we're playing away, we can put the black one up. When we're playing the third kit, we can put that one up. We've got some other shirts there lurking in the background. Since I moved, I haven't actually opened up and unpacked my box of all my football shirts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate them when we're talking about maybe non-Arsenal related stuff, and put like the Serie A shirts up. I've got a Porto shirt. I've got a Balk Salonika shirt. I've got all different shirts. We can mess around with them. Great value. If you're looking for a shirt rail, by the way, Amazon. Brilliant. Check it out. Anyway, Michael Casey, just on those numbers that we've just been going through, says every number is positive, Harry, apart from the number of trophies won. Yeah, and ultimately that's what we need to get to, right? That's what we need to start showing. And I agree with that, by the way. Like, people are not going to be wooed by these numbers forever. They want to see them translate to success on the pitch. There's clearly an improvement off the pitch in the way that things are being done. The commercial revenues are looking brilliant. The overall revenue has significantly increased. If I just sort of add it up, okay, so the revenue in total was £616.6 million. And the year before, it was 466.7. So you're talking about a revenue increase of £150 million, pretty much. That's a big jump. So everybody behind the scenes is doing their job. Everybody behind the scenes, in terms of generating as much revenue for the football club, is pulling their weight. Now we need to see people, sort of delivering. Now we need to see the club, I should say, delivering on the pitch, to kind of show the significance of those numbers outside of just a sort of a healthy bank balance. Okay. What else have we got? Let's take some of your comments. Jalali says, who is double screening tonight? I am. I'll be double screaming tonight. Screening, I should say. I might be screaming as well, depending on the games and the results. Pap says, what's your take on Andre Harriman training with the first team? Him and Butler to be used in the team. Both both will be hungry, but have to be patient. Both will be hungry to have an impact. I can't even read this morning. I said it earlier, so I don't want to repeat what we discussed earlier. But I mean, it's very, very difficult to judge how he would be able to kind of make that step up because he is so young. And although his numbers look good in the under 18s and in the Premier League too, when he's played in the UEFA Youth League and all the rest of it, it is a massive step up. So I am going to reserve judgment on whether I think he can or can't do it. I think we're in a position where he's going to get opportunities to, at the very least, be in and around the squad. And it will depend on what he shows, I think, as to whether or not Mikel Arteta feels that he can trust in him and throw him in. There was this rumor and this myth, wasn't there, back in the day, this misconception that Mikel was just anti any young players and didn't want to use them. And you look at who's playing and starring in our first team now, it kind of shows you that that's all a load of nonsense. So I do have faith that if those guys show what they need to, Mikel, given the circumstances, won't hesitate to use them and give them an opportunity. But they've got to show that they're ready. Amberley says, just going to watch City versus Real Madrid here. I've got no faith in Emery and Villa. I deep down, I feel that way as well. What else have we got in the live chat? Michael Casey says he's got a signed Martin Keown Invincible shirt. Harry, pride of place in his house. Brilliant. Lovely. There's nothing better than a good bit of football memorabilia, is there? Imran Aleem says, why do Arsenal go to the USA every summer? Don't you think Arsenal's commercial revenue would increase tenfold if they went on a summer tour to the Far East? Well, I think that's obviously tied to the ownership. I think that the ownership are big on maximizing the American market, which is a massive market. And obviously there's the links to the LA Rams and all the rest of it. And I think that's probably where it stems from. But also, you got to think about going into markets where you're going to acquire fans, if you like, that are going to spend money. And I'm sure that there are people in the Far East that would spend money on Arsenal merch and coming over and watching the team, etc., etc. But I think this strategy of sort of targeting the US, I really do think it works. Like, I've noticed a massive increase in the number of American people that I come across at Arsenal games. And you can tell by their accent, right? When they're speaking, I don't look at you and go, you're American, you're British, you're this, you're that. You can tell by hearing them speak. So that approach is working. And I think they'll probably want to just extract and squeeze as much juice out of that as they possibly can before maybe rethinking, what they do in the summers. The summer things, they're massive for commercial revenue. I'm sure they've played a big part in this this set of numbers that we're looking at this morning. Do I agree with what we do in preseason? I mean, I understand the need to do it as a massive football club, and I understand that it really, really does help and work for those who want to feel connected to the club and are living on the other side of the pond. So I understand why we do it. I just think, like, sometimes I look at it and I think, purely from a football perspective, do we need to be doing such long journeys? Do we need to be, playing games against teams that we're going to face over the course of the season? Like, it goes against what I believed preseason to be when I was growing up. And I'm still, at 34 years of age, trying to kind of process that the world's changed and it's moved on. And I'm maybe a bit of an old man in my attitude and mentality. Anyway, I am going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you're watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe if you're with us via the audio platforms. We'll be back with another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast very, very late on tonight, 10:15 p.m. We are going live with an episode of Symeou Says. We'll be reacting to whatever goes on in the Manchester City versus Real Madrid game. But more importantly for us, we'll be reflecting on what happens at Villa Park between Unai Emery's Aston Villa and Liverpool. I've always liked that Unai Emery fella. Honestly, always loved him. Fantastic manager. Let's see what he can do tonight. I'll catch you all soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Goodbye.